When a billionaire sees the world through the eyes of a struggling waitress, one ordinary moment changes his life and the life of his son forever. The billionaire was a man who had everything the world believed mattered. He had built his empire from the ground up, turning a small family business into a global name that appeared in newspapers and financial magazines. His face was often on television screens during interviews where reporters praised his intelligence and his ability to make bold decisions. People admired him, people feared him, and people envied him. But behind the glass walls of his tall office buildings and beyond the gates of his sprawling mansion was a silence that followed him everywhere. It was the kind of silence that could not be filled with money, power, or success. It was the silence of loneliness. And it lived inside his home because of the distance between him and his young son. The boy was only 7 years old, with wide eyes that carried innocence and questions, but rarely joy. He had everything a child could. Ask for rooms filled with toys, the latest gadgets, shelves lined with books, and tutors who came from the most prestigious institutions. His father had made sure of that. He believed that by giving his son the best, he was showing him love. He believed expensive gifts were proof of care, but the boy did not see it that way. What he longed for was not another toy or another tutor. He longed for his father's time. Every morning the boy would wake up and find the mansion quiet, except for the sound of staff moving around. His father was always already gone, leaving behind only a rushed kiss on the forehead or sometimes just a note on the breakfast table. At night, the boy often fell asleep before his father returned from meetings and late dinners with important people. When he did manage to stay awake, he would lie in bed waiting, listening to the sound of cars arriving outside. Sometimes he would hear his father's voice in the hallway, deep and tired, giving short instructions to the staff. The boy would sit up, hoping his father might peek into his room, but most nights, the door never opened. The man loved his son, but his way of loving was buried under the weight of responsibility. He told himself that all the hours he spent away from home, all the late nights, were for his son's future. He told himself that money would secure the boy's happiness, education, and comfort. But deep down, he knew something was missing. He saw the difference when he came home and looked into his child's eyes. There was no excitement, no eagerness to share stories of the day, only a quiet nod or a polite good night. Him in ways he could not admit to anyone. When his friends spoke about their children, about weekends at the park or playing football in the yard, he smiled politely and pretended he did the same. In truth, he couldn't remember the last time he had played with his son. He could remember deals worth millions. He could remember board meetings that lasted for hours. But he could not remember sitting on the floor building blocks or laughing over silly jokes. The boy seemed like a stranger living in his house. And yet that stranger was the one person he loved most. The mansion reflected his emptiness. It was filled with luxury, but not warmth. The boy had a nanny who looked after him, but no one could replace the presence of a father. Sometimes the child would take his toy car and drive it across the polished marble floors, pretending his father was sitting beside him. Other times, he would draw pictures of himself holding hands with a taller figure, showing them walking outside or sitting together on a bench. He would quietly put those drawings in a folder, as if waiting for a day when his father would finally sit down and look at them. The billionaire occasionally noticed the folder on the boy's desk when he passed by, but he never had the courage to open it. He feared what he might find evidence of the love his son wanted, but he had not given. So he would walk away, convincing himself that tomorrow he would spend time with the boy. But tomorrow never came, because his schedule was always filled with meetings, calls, and urgent matters. He believed there would always be more time later, but days turned into months, and the distance grew larger. One evening, after another long meeting, the man arrived home, exhausted. He loosened his tie, walked into the living room, and sat down. The television was on low volume, and the nanny was cleaning up after dinner. He asked where his son was, and she said softly that the boy had gone to bed early again. Something inside him broke a little at those words. He realized he couldn't even remember the last time he had sat with his child during dinner. He decided to walk quietly to the boy's room. He pushed the door open slightly and peeked in. The night lamp cast a soft glow, and the boy was curled up under the blanket, his little hand holding onto a stuffed animal. On the bedside table was a picture frame. The billionaire walked closer and saw it was a photo of the two of them taken years ago, when his son was just a toddler. In the picture, he was holding the boy in his arms, and both of them were laughing. Freely, he couldn't remember the exact day, but he could see the happiness in their faces. The man sat on the edge of the bed quietly, staring at his son's sleeping face. The child's features were so delicate, so full of innocence, and yet there was a faint shadow of sadness, even in sleep. The father reached out and gently brushed the boy's hair back. For the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to feel the guilt that had been building inside him. He whispered an apology his son could not hear. He whispered promises he wasn't sure how to keep. He wanted to tell the boy that he was trying, that he loved him more than anything, but the words stuck in his throat. All he could do was sit there until the weight of his exhaustion pushed him to leave. On the way back to his own room, he passed by the playroom. It was filled with expensive toys, remote-controlled cars, robots, trains, puzzles, games, but the room felt untouched. Dust gathered on some of the boxes, and the shelves looked more like a showroom than a place where a child played. The man stood there in the doorway and realized that money had created a museum of toys instead of memories. He felt a chill as he understood that all the things he had bought were meaningless if they did not bring joy. The next morning, he drove his son to school himself, something he hadn't done in months. The boy sat quietly in the back seat, holding his school bag tightly. The father tried to start a conversation, asking how school was going, what subjects he liked, and if he had made new friends. The boy gave short answers, polite but distant. The father realized his son didn't know how to talk to him anymore. They were strangers in the same car, bound by blood but separated by silence. That day, the man couldn't focus during his meetings. The image of his son's quiet face haunted him. For the first time, business deals and profits didn't seem as important. He kept asking himself what he was doing wrong. He had everything the world admired, but the one thing he truly wanted, his son's happiness, was slipping through his fingers. He knew something had to change, but he didn't know what. Didn't know how to step into his son's world, how to bridge the gap years of distance had created. The billionaire felt like a man standing outside a door he didn't know how to open. He wanted to knock, but he feared there would be no answer. And yet he knew he couldn't keep living this way. Something inside him whispered that life was more than business meetings and bank accounts, that the laughter of a child was worth more than all the billions he had made. But he didn't yet understand how to reclaim that laughter, how to bring it back into his son's life and his own. The billionaire decided one morning to take a break from his hectic schedule. He wanted to do something different, something that didn't involve meetings, contracts, or numbers on a screen. He wanted to spend time with his son, even if he wasn't entirely sure how. After a long discussion with his assistant, he picked a small, unassuming cafe not far from the city center. It was nothing like the restaurants he usually visited. There were no chandeliers, no velvet chairs, no crystal glasses. It was simple, with a few wooden tables, colorful chairs, and a soft smell of coffee mixed with fresh bread. He hoped his son would like it, though he wasn't sure what a 7-year-old could find interesting in such a place. As they arrived, the boy's eyes widened. The cafe was smaller than the restaurants he was used to, but there was a warm, friendly energy in the air. The walls were painted with soft colors, decorated with little paintings and photos that seemed to tell stories. Outside the window, people passed by, waving occasionally to friends or stopping to look at the menu. The child clutched his father's hand tightly, curious but a little hesitant. He had never been in a place like this before. The door opened, and a bell jingled. Behind the counter stood a woman, smiling as she noticed them enter. She was a waitress, perhaps in her late 20s, with kind eyes and a warm expression. Her hair was tied back simply, and her uniform was neat but plain. She greeted them not as a celebrity's child and father, but as people stepping into her cafe. "Good morning," she said cheerfully. "Welcome. Have a seat wherever you like." The billionaire, used to people fawning over him, felt a small twinge of surprise. There was no recognition in her voice, no awe or fear. She just treated them as ordinary guests. He glanced at his son, who was already looking around, fascinated by the small details. A tiny bird figurine on a shelf, a vase of fresh flowers on a table, and a small chalkboard that listed the day's specials in colorful chalk. The boy's face brightened a little, and the father felt a flicker of hope. They chose a table by the window. The waitress brought them menus, and as she did, she knelt slightly to speak to the boy. "What would you like today?" she asked. Her tone was gentle, playful. She didn't rush. She didn't assume he would pick the most expensive item or ask for something complicated. She genuinely wanted to know what he liked. The boy hesitated, unsure how to answer, and the waitress smiled, giving him time. Her patience made him relax. The billionaire watched quietly, noticing how his son's shoulders had loosened, how a tiny smile began to appear. He realized this was the first moment in weeks that he had truly seen his child's interest awaken. It was not in a toy or gadget, but in the small kindness of a stranger who cared about him. The father felt a mix of surprise and guilt, seeing how simple attention could light up the boy's world. As they waited for their food, the waitress came back with a small coloring sheet and crayons, placing them in front of the boy. "Here," she said softly. "Maybe this will make the time pass faster." The boy's eyes lit up. He had not expected this. He started coloring immediately, choosing bright colors, carefully filling in the shapes, and even showing the drawings to his father. The billionaire leaned in, attempting to engage, but he felt awkward. He had forgotten how to interact with a child this age, how to laugh with him over something so small. The boy noticed his hesitation and smiled shyly, then went back to coloring. Absorbed and happy, the waitress returned with their drinks and a small plate of pastries. She set them down gently and sat on a stool near the boy. She asked about his favorite games, what do you like to do at home, and what made him laugh. The father noticed how easily the boy spoke to her, how animated he became. He realized that this simple, genuine conversation was something his son had been missing. It was not just attention, it was connection. The waitress was engaging with him at his level, without pressure, without expectation. She saw the child, not the wealthy father or the reputation that followed him. As the meal went on, the boy became bolder. He asked questions about the cafe, about the pastries, and even about the waitress's own life. She answered him honestly but lightly, telling him small stories about why she loved baking, how she learned to make her favorite cake, and how she sometimes made up little games to make her day more fun. The billionaire watched, feeling a strange warmth in his chest. He had never considered that happiness could be so simple. Stories shared over pastries could bring joy that no toy or gadget ever had. The boy began to imitate the waitress, picking up a napkin and folding it in the same way she did, trying to mimic her small gestures. She laughed softly and encouraged him, praising his efforts. The father noticed how natural this interaction was, how effortless her kindness seemed. He felt a pang of guilt, realizing that he had spent years trying to teach his son about the world of wealth and success, while the boy simply wanted human warmth and play. As they finished their meal, the waitress suggested a small game, pretending to serve the boy as if he were the customer. The boy giggled uncontrollably, and the father found himself smiling for the first time that morning. He remembered a childhood of his own, when he played similar games with his parents, when laughter came freely and without reason. Seeing his son so happy stirred a longing he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. The cafe, so ordinary and unassuming, had become a place of revelation. The father realized that the walls and luxury he surrounded himself with could never replace the connection his son needed. The boy's laughter, sparked by the attention and playfulness of a stranger, was more powerful than any material gift. The billionaire sat back, quietly observing, feeling both awe and regret. He understood that it was not wealth that brought happiness, but love, attention, and care. After their visit, the boy held his father's hand tightly as they left the cafe. He chatted about the colors, the games, and the little treats he had enjoyed. The father listened, nodding, trying to keep up with the excitement, but also reflecting on what he had learned. That day, a simple cafe visit became more than a meal. It became a lesson in humanity, humility, and the simple joys of life that money could never buy. The billionaire understood that his son's world was different from his own, and that stepping into it required patience, playfulness, and genuine presence. The drive back home was quiet but comfortable. The boy kept talking softly about the games and the pastries, and the father listened. For the first time, he felt a real connection, a sense of closeness he had not known for months. He realized that life did not have to be complicated to be meaningful, that happiness could be found in small gestures, and that his son's laughter was more valuable than any deal he could ever make. That morning at the cafe, the father began to see a new path, one where he could truly be present for his son, where he could learn to engage with him not as a billionaire, but as a father who cared. The visit ended, but its impact lingered. The father kept replaying moments in his mind, the gentle smile of the waitress, the way she knelt to speak to his son, the boy's laughter echoing in the small cafe. He realized that such ordinary people could teach extraordinary lessons, that wealth and power were meaningless without the bonds of love and attention. He resolved quietly that he would find ways to bring more moments like this into his son's life, even if it meant stepping away from his empire for a while. For the first time, he understood that true happiness could not be bought, had to be experienced, shared, and nurtured. The next few days after the cafe visit were unusual for the billionaire. He went about his work as usual, sitting through endless meetings, signing papers, and making decisions that affected thousands of lives. Yet his mind kept drifting back to the little cafe, the waitress, and most importantly, to the bright eyes of his son. For the first time in many years, he realized that his wealth and power, though impressive, had never truly connected him to his child. He saw now that no amount of luxury, toys, or trips could replace simple attention and shared moments. He found himself thinking about the waitress, often not in a business sense, nor in a romantic sense, but in a human sense. Her patience, kindness, and the genuine way she treated people had left a deep impression on him. One morning, he decided he wanted to return to the cafe, this time without any plans other than spending time with his son. He wanted to watch him interact again, to see the joy on his face, and to experience the warmth that had seemed so absent from their lives until that day. The drive to the cafe felt different this time. He didn't rush, didn't check his phone. Constantly, he wanted the morning to feel calm and unhurried, a rare moment for someone so consumed by the pressures of wealth. As they entered the cafe, the familiar bell jingled and the waitress looked up from her work, giving them a welcoming smile. The boy ran ahead, eager to show her his drawings from home, little sketches he had made inspired by their last visit. The waitress knelt down again, taking each drawing in her hands and examining them carefully. She praised his efforts, commenting on the colors and the details. The boy beamed with pride, clearly enjoying the attention and the acknowledgement of his creativity. The billionaire watched quietly, feeling a warmth he hadn't realized he had been missing for so long. Over breakfast, they talked more openly than usual. The father tried to engage in conversation with his son, asking about his school, his friends, and the little things that made him laugh. The boy responded eagerly, clearly feeling comfortable and safe in this space. The billionaire noticed how easy it was for the waitress to connect with his son, how naturally she encouraged him to express himself. He wondered how many simple moments of joy he had missed over the years while focusing on his business empire. Unaware that these small, meaningful interactions were the true foundation of happiness. During their visit, something remarkable happened. The waitress, noticing that the cafe had a small stage corner used for occasional events, suggested a little improvisation game with the boy. She encouraged him to pretend he was a customer and she was serving him a royal meal. The boy's imagination ran wild. He crawled on the floor, pretending it was a grand palace, laughing as he commanded imaginary servants and dishes. The billionaire was taken aback. He had never seen his son so uninhibited, so alive. He realized that his child had been craving this kind of playful freedom, this kind of unstructured creativity that couldn't be bought or scheduled. The father sat silently for a moment, observing, feeling a mixture of awe and shame. Awe for the sheer joy and creativity of his son, and shame for not recognizing earlier how much these small, imaginative moments mattered. The boy's laughter echoed in the cafe, contagious and pure, and even other patrons smiled as they noticed the child's happiness. The waitress encouraged him, joining in the game subtly without ever forcing him, praising him for his imaginative storytelling and laughing along with him genuinely. The billionaire felt a wave of emotion he hadn't felt in years, and understanding that life's richest moments were not in contracts or stock numbers, but in shared laughter and human connection. As the morning continued, the father tried to join in, though awkwardly at first. He crawled along the floor beside his son, laughing at the boy's antics and participating in the imaginary palace adventure. His son looked up at him, eyes wide with surprise and delight, noticing for the first time that his father was truly present and engaged. The father realized that his presence, not his gifts, not his money, was what his son needed. He discovered the power of genuine attention, of being there fully, without distractions or agendas. The waitress watched this quietly, offering gentle guidance and encouragement. She didn't impose, didn't lecture, but her calm, positive energy allowed the father and son to connect naturally. She subtly guided the father to step into his son's world, to see through the eyes of a child, to rediscover the joy of imagination. He realized that she was teaching him something more valuable than any business lesson in love, patience, and human connection. During a brief pause, the father reflected on his life. He saw how he had been consumed by wealth and success, how he had focused on power and status, while missing the simple moments that made life meaningful. He understood that his son's happiness had been neglected, not out of malice, but out of ignorance. He had assumed that providing the best material things would be enough, that his presence wasn't as critical. Now he saw the truth. Without attention, care, and love, no amount of money could fill the void. The boy, meanwhile, was completely absorbed in his game, oblivious to the weight of his father's realization. He laughed freely, played creatively, and engaged with the waitress, and his father in a way that was pure and natural. The father observed how effortlessly his son could be happy in the right environment. He realized that happiness did not require perfection, wealth, or status. It required presence, imagination, and genuine human connection. As the cafe visit came to a close, the father and son reluctantly prepared to leave. The boy hugged the waitress, thanking her for the games, the stories, and the attention. The billionaire watched, grateful and humbled. He realized that the waitress, a woman with a warm heart, had given his son and him a gift far greater than anything he could buy. She had provided understanding, guidance, a model of genuine human kindness. In the car, driving back home, the father reflected on what he had learned. He understood that the experience was not just about a cafe or a game, it was about perspective. He had seen the world through his son's eyes, realized the power of attention, and learned the importance of connection. The boy chattered happily, recounting every detail, and the father listened intently, no longer preoccupied with work or obligations. He felt a deep, growing bond forming, one that could not be broken by wealth or status. That afternoon he began thinking about ways to bring more of these experiences into his son's life. He realized that he needed to be more present, to participate fully, to embrace creativity, and to value small moments over grand gestures. He understood that his son needed him not as a provider, but as a companion, a playmate, and a guide through the simple joys of life. The experience at the cafe had changed him profoundly. He was no longer just a billionaire consumed by ambition and control. It was a father learning the meaning of presence, empathy, and love. He recognized that true wealth was not counted in money, but in moments of shared joy, laughter, and connection. He also realized that sometimes the most ordinary people, like the waitress, could teach the most extraordinary lessons. Over the following days, he found himself more attentive, more willing to engage in small acts of play and creativity with his son. He would read stories, play simple games, and even bake small treats together, inspired by what he had seen at the cafe. He understood that these small, consistent moments would have a far greater impact on his child than any extravagant gift or a lavish trip. The billionaire began to see a pattern in life that he had previously ignored. The people who seemed ordinary, the ones without wealth or fame, often had a depth of understanding and a richness of spirit that money could never buy. He reflected on the waitress's patience, her warmth, and her ability to make both a child and an adult feel valued. He realized that the lessons of life often came from humility, kindness, and authenticity rather than status and power. As weeks passed, the father and son visited the cafe several more times, each time building on their connection. The boy grew more confident, more imaginative, and happier, while the father grew more patient, more empathetic, and more attuned to the simple joys of life. Each visit was a reminder that love, attention, and shared experiences were the true treasures of life, far surpassing any material wealth. The billionaire also began to reflect on his own childhood, realizing that the lessons he had learned from his parents were more about love and presence than money or power. He understood now that he had been repeating the mistakes of the past, focusing too much on achievement and too little on human connection. The cafe, the waitress, and his son had helped him break free from that cycle, opening his eyes to a more meaningful, heartfelt way of living through these experiences. The billionaire discovered that the simplest act, smile, a game, a moment of genuine attention, could transform relationships. He felt a profound shift in his priorities, realizing that he could build a legacy not just in wealth, but in the quality of his relationships, especially with his son. He understood that nurturing curiosity, imagination, and joy in a child was far more important than any financial lesson or material gift. By immersing himself in these simple yet profound experiences, the billionaire began to redefine his understanding of success. He realized that true achievement was not just measured by financial gain, but by the depth of relationships, the quality of attention given, and the happiness nurtured in those we care about most. The cafe had become a symbol of this transformation, a reminder that life's greatest treasures were often hidden in ordinary places, waiting to be discovered with open eyes and an open heart. The transformation in the billionaire's life continued to unfold in ways he could never have anticipated. After the experiences at the cafe and the playful moments with his son, he began to notice subtle shifts, not only in himself, but in how people around him responded to him. In the past, his presence commanded respect because of his wealth and power, but now he wanted to earn connection and warmth through genuine attention and kindness. He realized that these qualities, though often overlooked in the corridors of high finance and luxury, held far greater meaning for real human relationships. He started paying attention to the little things, how he spoke, how he listened, and how he made others feel valued. At home, the change was even more pronounced. His son had begun to open up in ways that had seemed impossible before. The boy would share little stories about his day, his imagination running wild with fanciful adventures that the father had once dismissed as trivial. But now he listened, intently asking questions, laughing with him, and celebrating even the smallest achievements. The boy's eyes would light up with excitement, clearly feeling seen and appreciated. The billionaire realized that this attention, the undivided presence he offered, was more powerful than any material gift he could provide. One afternoon, as he sat in his office overlooking the city, he found himself reflecting on the contrast between his previous life and the one he was beginning to embrace. For years, he had been consumed by spreadsheets, deals, and projections, believing that success was measured by numbers, titles, and acquisitions. But in the quiet moments with his son, in the laughter echoing through a small cafe, he discovered a completely different metric for life, one measured in shared joy, mutual understanding, and authentic connection. It was a lesson that no amount of education or experience could have taught him. It was learned through observation, reflection, and participation in real human moments. Determined to carry these lessons further, he began restructuring his days. He dedicated mornings to spending time with his son before school, engaging in playful activities, reading stories, or simply talking about dreams and ideas. These moments became sacred rituals, grounding both of them and creating a bond that had been missing for years. The father noticed how these simple interactions nurtured his son's confidence and creativity. The boy became more expressive, more willing to try new things, and more empathetic toward others. Observing this growth filled the billionaire with a sense of pride that no financial success had ever given him. The lessons from the waitress continued to resonate. He understood that her quiet strength, her patience, and her ability to connect without pretense were the keys to creating meaningful relationships. He began to model this behavior consciously, not just with his son, but with everyone around him. At home, he listened more, interrupted less, and allowed conversations to flow naturally. At work, he started noticing how small gestures, sincere praise, acknowledgement of effort, or simply asking someone how they work could transform interactions that had previously been purely transactional. He began to see that leadership and influence were not solely about commanding authority, but about inspiring trust and fostering genuine human connections. One day, the billionaire decided to invite the waitress and her family to a small gathering at his home. He wanted to express his gratitude, not with wealth, but with genuine appreciation. The gathering was informal, filled with laughter, storytelling, and shared meals. For the first time, he experienced what it meant to connect across social and economic boundaries without the filter of status or privilege. He watched as his son interacted with her children, exchanging imaginative games and ideas. The billionaire felt a profound sense of joy seeing these connections blossom, recognizing that kindness and attention were the true currencies of human interaction. The impact of these experiences extended beyond his immediate family. At work, he began mentoring younger colleagues, not through pressure or expectation, but through encouragement and understanding. He listened to their ideas, celebrated their successes, and offered guidance without judgment. Employees who had once viewed him as distant and intimidating now felt a sense of respect mixed with warmth. He discovered that true influence was less about authority and more about empathy, presence, and the ability to inspire others through authenticity. Meanwhile, the bond with his son deepened in ways that surprised him. They began sharing hobbies, exploring creative projects, and taking small adventures together. The billionaire noticed how these activities, though simple, created lasting memories and shaped his son's character. The boy learned the value of imagination, the joy of discovery, and the importance of kindness and attention to others. The father realized that these lessons would stay with his son far longer than any financial inheritance, and that understanding the world with empathy and creativity was a gift no wealth could replace. Through all of this, the billionaire also began to reflect on his own upbringing and life choices. He remembered moments when he had been focused solely on achievement, neglecting emotional connections and simple joys. He recognized the pattern of prioritizing work and status over relationships, and he was determined not to repeat it. The cafe and the waitress had inadvertently opened his eyes to this blind spot, showing him that the richness of life came not from accumulation, but from the depth of human bonds and the ability to be fully present. As weeks turned into months, the father and son developed a routine of shared experiences that brought them closer than ever before. They would start mornings with creative play, spend afternoons exploring nature, and end evenings sharing stories and reflections. The billionaire discovered that these activities, though ordinary, were profoundly transformative. They fostered trust, nurtured emotional intelligence, and strengthened the sense of security and love between them. He realized that being a parent was not about control or perfection, but about showing up consistently, listening attentively, and allowing space for growth and imagination. The billionaire's transformation also began to influence his philanthropic efforts. He started focusing on initiatives that emphasized education, creativity, and emotional well-being for children. Understanding that true impact came not just from funding, but from fostering environments where young minds could flourish. He collaborated with organizations that encourage mentorship, play, and imagination. Inspired by the lessons he had learned from his son and the waitress, He saw these efforts not as a way to gain recognition, but as a way to pass on the values that had become central to his life: empathy, tension, and meaningful connection. In addition to philanthropy, he began cultivating mindfulness and reflection. In his personal life, he spent time each day observing, listening, and appreciating the world around him. Small acts, like noticing the details in his son's drawings, complimenting a colleague sincerely, or spending time in nature without distraction, became opportunities to reinforce the lessons he had learned. These practices helped him stay grounded, reminding him that the pursuit of wealth and success, though important, is not the ultimate measure of a life well lived. The billionaire also noticed a change in how he viewed challenges. In the past, setbacks and obstacles had been sources of stress and frustration. Now, he approached them with curiosity, patience, and a willingness to learn. He understood that mistakes and difficulties were opportunities for growth, not just for him, but for his son and those around him. This perspective allowed him to navigate life with greater resilience, teaching by example that empathy, patience, and presence were as essential as skill and strategy. Through all of these experiences, the billionaire continued to marvel at the unexpected power of ordinary human interactions. A simple act of kindness, a moment of attention, or a playful game had altered the course of his life in ways he could never have predicted. He realized that the waitress had been a catalyst, not by grand gestures, but by embodying qualities of patience, empathy, and presence that he had long overlooked. She had demonstrated the profound influence one person could have simply by being fully human and fully attentive to others. The billionaire also recognized that his was a reflection of his own growth. As the boy became more confident, expressive, and joyful, he saw the tangible results of his own efforts to change. He understood that parenting was a continuous journey of learning, adjusting, and showing up with sincerity. The lessons from the cafe had provided a foundation, but the ongoing commitment to presence, play, and empathy was what would sustain their bond for a lifetime. As the father observed his son one afternoon, laughing freely while building an imaginary castle in their living room, he felt a profound sense of fulfillment. He realized that the wealth he had spent years acquiring, the influence he had built, and the power he had wielded could never compare to the joy of seeing his child thrive emotionally, creatively, and socially. He understood that true success was measured not by the size of one's bank account, but by the richness of the connections one nurtures, the love one gives, and the growth one inspires in others. The billionaire also began to explore ways to bring these lessons to others. He hosted small workshops for parents, emphasizing the importance of attention, creativity, and emotional connection. He shared his own journey openly, recounting how a simple cafe visit and a kind waitress had reshaped his perspective on life, parenting, and human connection. His story resonated with many, offering insight into the often overlooked value of presence, empathy, and meaningful interaction. In the midst of this transformation, the billionaire never lost sight of his son's happiness. Every decision he made, whether personal, professional, or philanthropic, was guided by the principle of nurturing genuine connections and fostering environments where joy, creativity, and growth could flourish. He realized that by prioritizing these values, he was not only enriching his own life, but also creating a legacy of love, empathy, and meaningful relationships that would endure far beyond material wealth. Over time, the father and son developed a rhythm of life that balanced ambition with presence, work with play, and success with genuine human connection. The billionaire had learned to navigate the complexities of his world while remaining grounded in the values that mattered most. He understood that wealth, power, and status could coexist with empathy, tension, and love, but only if he remained conscious, intentional, and committed to the lessons he had learned from the cafe, the waitress, and most importantly, his son. Through these continuous experiences, the billionaire discovered the true essence of fulfillment. It was not in acquisitions, recognition, or status, but in the laughter of a child, the warmth of genuine attention, and the shared moments of joy that built unbreakable bonds. He realized that life's most precious treasures were often found in ordinary places, in simple interactions, and in the conscious choice to be present, compassionate, and engaged with the people who mattered most. Asterisk, by the time the final chapter of the billionaire's transformation unfolded, the changes in his life were profound and undeniable. The man who had once defined success solely by wealth, power, and prestige had now embraced a completely different understanding of what it meant to live fully. His relationship with his son had grown into a deep, nurturing bond founded on mutual respect, attention, and joy. Every day, the father witnessed the incredible impact that his presence and care had on his son's growth, happiness, and confidence. The boy thrived in ways that money could never create. His imagination flourished. His empathy deepened, and his zest for life became contagious to everyone around him. The billionaire had also learned to carry lessons from that fateful cafe into every corner of his life. He approached people differently now, whether they were employees, acquaintances, or strangers. He had discovered that kindness, attentiveness, and humility held more power than any boardroom negotiation or financial maneuver. At work meetings, became more collaborative. Employees felt valued and inspired rather than pressured or overlooked. He realized that true leadership was not about issuing commands or being feared. It was about earning trust and respect through genuine engagement, listening, and understanding. One of the most significant shifts was how he viewed wealth itself. In the past, money had been a tool to acquire status, possessions, and admiration. But now, he saw it as a resource to create meaningful impact, support others, and foster experiences that mattered. He started channeling his fortune into causes that nurtured creativity, education, and emotional well-being for children and families, believing that these contributions could shape lives in ways far more lasting than luxury or opulence ever could. He sponsored programs that encouraged imagination, critical thinking, and empathy, aiming to give children the opportunities he had realized were more valuable than any inheritance, the chance to grow into thoughtful, compassionate, and resilient individuals. His home life, once defined by schedules and obligations, transformed into a sanctuary of shared experiences and connection. Mornings began with laughter and play, afternoons were spent exploring passions and hobbies together, and evenings became times for stories, reflection, and quiet companionship. The billionaire noticed how these rituals had cultivated not just happiness in his son, but a sense of security and self-worth that no amount of wealth could provide. He marveled at how much richer his life had become, not in possessions or status, but in shared moments, laughter, and the deepening of emotional bonds. The father also became keenly aware of the subtle, everyday lessons that his son was learning from him. Every interaction was a chance to model patience, respect, and integrity. He understood that children absorb more from actions than words, so he made conscious choices to embody the principles he wanted his son to adopt. This meant listening, attentively admitting mistakes, showing gratitude, and engaging with the world thoughtfully. Through this, the billionaire realized that parenting was an ongoing journey of learning and growth for both the parent and the child. One afternoon, while walking through a local park with his son, he reflected on how far he had come. He remembered the first time he had observed the waitress at the cafe. Her quiet dignity, resilience, and kindness had left an imprint on him he would never forget. At that moment, he had been a man focused on wealth and status, yet she had demonstrated something far more valuable: the power of presence, empathy, and genuine human connection. That observation had sparked a chain of changes that ultimately reshaped his life, his values, and his approach to fatherhood. He realized that life's most profound lessons often came from unexpected places and ordinary people. The billionaire also noticed how his own happiness had deepened. Previously, he had experienced fleeting satisfaction from acquisitions or achievements, only to feel a sense of emptiness soon after. Now, he found enduring fulfillment in simple, meaningful experiences, seeing his son's eyes light up with curiosity, sharing a meal with someone in need, or hearing a heartfelt expression of gratitude from a friend or employee. These moments created a sense of purpose and contentment far beyond the temporary thrill of material gain. He had discovered that true richness was measured in connection, compassion, and shared joy. At work, he introduced new policies and practices that reflected his transformed values. Teams were encouraged to collaborate, creativity was rewarded, and emotional intelligence was considered as important as technical skill. Employees found themselves in a more supportive and inspiring environment, where they felt heard and appreciated. The billionaire realized that success in business could coexist with humanity and care, that it was possible to lead with both strategy and heart. This approach not only increased productivity, but also fostered loyalty, respect, and a sense of community that had been absent in his previous corporate culture. One of the most remarkable outcomes of his transformation was the way his son began to mirror these values. The boy, observing his father's example, grew into a compassionate, thoughtful, and imaginative individual. He demonstrated kindness toward friends, curiosity about the world, and empathy toward others in ways that surprised even the father. These qualities were nurtured not by money or material gifts, but by consistent attention, shared experiences, and the demonstration of integrity and care in everyday life. The billionaire realized that the greatest legacy he could leave the son was not wealth, but the lessons embedded in his actions, the love he showed, and the example he set. The billionaire also expanded his circle of meaningful relationships. Friends and colleagues who had once interacted with him primarily for his status began to connect with him on a more authentic level. He cultivated relationships based on mutual respect, trust, and shared values rather than convenience or influence. These connections brought richness to his life that wealth alone could never provide, showing him that meaningful relationships require presence, honesty, and emotional investment. Through all these changes, he maintained a sense of humility. He understood that no matter how much he had achieved financially, the real measure of life's worth lay in the quality of the connections he nurtured and the positive impact he made. He became more reflective, often journaling or meditating on his experiences, considering how each decision aligned with his values and the legacy he wished to leave behind. These practices reinforced his commitment to living intentionally with purpose, and in a way that prioritized people over possessions. In the evenings, he and his son would often sit together, recounting the day's experiences, sharing stories, and imagining future adventures. These conversations were not only enjoyable, but also educational, fostering critical thinking, creativity, and emotional growth. The father observed how these moments strengthened his son's confidence and ability to navigate the world with empathy and resilience. He realized that time spent nurturing the mind and heart was infinitely more valuable than any lesson learned from money or material success. The billionaire also found that his transformation influenced his approach to challenges and setbacks. Instead of reacting with frustration or impatience, he approached difficulties with calmness, perspective, and a focus on learning. He modeled resilience and problem-solving for his son, showing that challenges were opportunities for growth rather than sources of fear. This mindset created an environment where both he and his son felt empowered to face uncertainty with courage and creativity. As the months passed, the billionaire continued to refine his understanding of wealth and success. He integrated lessons from the cafe, the Waitress, and his own journey into a holistic philosophy that life's greatest rewards came from love, presence, empathy, and the nurturing of human potential. He embraced the idea that material wealth was merely a tool, valuable only when used to enrich the lives of others and create lasting, meaningful experiences. This realization guided his personal choices, professional strategies, and philanthropic efforts alike. One significant step he took was establishing a foundation focused on mentorship, education, and emotional growth for children from all backgrounds. Inspired by his experiences with his son and the Waitress, he wanted to ensure that every child had the opportunity to develop creativity, confidence, and empathy. The foundation offered programs that combined learning with play, imagination with skill building, and guidance with emotional support. He saw this as a way to extend the lessons he had learned into the wider world, creating ripple effects that could transform lives beyond his immediate family. The billionaire also cultivated gratitude as a daily practice. He recognized that acknowledging the contributions, efforts, and presence of others amplified joy and strengthened bonds. Whether thanking his employees for their hard work, appreciating the small gestures of friends, or expressing love and admiration to his son, he found that gratitude was a simple yet powerful force for connection and fulfillment. He noticed that these expressions of appreciation created a culture of positivity, mutual respect, and care in every sphere of his life. Through all these experiences, the billionaire reflected on the incredible journey that had begun with a seemingly ordinary moment in a cafe. Observing a waitress and interacting with his son had sparked a profound transformation that reshaped his values, priorities, and understanding of life. He realized that true wisdom often comes from humility, observation, and the willingness to embrace change. The lessons of patience, empathy, attentiveness, and authenticity became the guiding principles of his life, influencing every action, decision, and relationship. The billionaire's bond with his son became a source of continuous inspiration. Together, they explored new hobbies, engaged in creative projects, and shared adventures that nurtured curiosity, resilience, and joy. The father found immense satisfaction in witnessing his son's growth, knowing that the values he had internalized were taking root in the next generation. He understood that the love, attention, and guidance he provided would shape his son's character and choices far more profoundly than any material inheritance could. As he observed his life now, the billionaire saw a harmony he had never known before. Wealth, influence, and success coexisted seamlessly with compassion, presence, and genuine human connection. He had learned that the true richness of life lay not in accumulation but in the cultivation of relationships, the fostering of empathy, and the creation of environments where joy, learning, and growth could flourish. Each day offered opportunities to reinforce these values, nurture his son, and impact others positively. The billionaire also discovered the joy of teaching and sharing his insights. By mentoring others, offering guidance, and creating spaces for creativity and growth, he extended the lessons of his journey to a broader community. He realized that one person's transformation could inspire countless others, creating a ripple effect that spread far beyond what he had initially imagined. The legacy he was building was not defined by material wealth, but by the lives touched, the minds nurtured, and the hearts inspired by intentional, compassionate action. Through reflection, practice, and dedication, he integrated the principles of presence, empathy, and authentic connection into every aspect of his life. He became a model not just for his son, but for everyone who interacted with him. People saw in him a living example of how wealth and success could coexist with humanity, kindness, and emotional depth. He understood that this integration was an ongoing process, requiring constant mindfulness, patience, and willingness to learn. By the end of this transformation, the billionaire had truly redefined his life. The lessons from the cafe, the waitress, and his experiences with his son had created a foundation of values that guided his actions, decisions, and relationships. He had discovered that the greatest treasures in life were intangible: love, presence, empathy, and the nurturing of human potential. These treasures shaped his legacy, his personal fulfillment, and the future of his son, ensuring that the impact of his transformation would endure long after material wealth was no longer relevant. Ultimately, the billionaire's story became a testament to the power of ordinary moments to spark extraordinary change. A simple act of observation, a willingness to engage, and a commitment to presence had reshaped his understanding of life, success, and happiness. He had learned that true wealth was measured not by possessions or status, but by the depth of human connection, the capacity for empathy, and the joy of nurturing others. Through this journey, he had become not just a successful businessman, but a truly fulfilled human being, a loving father, and a force for positive change in the world.